The transformation from an INFJ to Sigma INFJ is not a matter of adopting a new personality type, but rather a shift in how INFJs engage with the world after experiencing certain emotional or existential triggers. The catalyst for this transformation is often a prolonged period of emotional disillusionment. INFJs tend to see the potential in others and offer support, loyalty, and understanding in ways that often go unreciprocated or taken for granted. Over time, these patterns of one-sided emotional labor can wear down even the most patient INFJ. When an INFJ's boundaries are consistently ignored, when their authenticity is undervalued, or when their efforts to build meaningful relationships are met with manipulation or superficiality, they may begin to reassess how they operate in the world. This reassessment leads to an internal pivot. The INFJ, who once prioritized harmony and deep emotional ties, begins to prioritize sovereignty of the self. The usual extroverted feeling function that seeks to harmonize with others starts to take a back seat, while introverted intuition and analytical thinking rise to the forefront. They don't stop caring, but they care differently, selectively, wisely, and with an emphasis on self-respect. This is not a cold withdrawal, but a protective recalibration. The INFJ learns to detach emotionally, not because they have stopped feeling, but because they have begun to see the cost of emotional overextension. At this stage, the INFJ becomes more strategic, more observant, and more independent in thought and action. Their empathy remains, but it is now tempered by discernment. They stop looking for external validation or understanding and start to find fulfillment in their inner vision, creative pursuits, and intellectual independence. This is the essence of the Sigma INFJ, a quiet, powerful force who moves through the world with both emotional depth and intellectual detachment. The world may see them as mysterious, aloof, or enigmatic, but this is simply a result of the INFJ no longer broadcasting their inner world so freely. They choose against access. Relationships are still important, but only those grounded in authenticity, mutual respect, and shared values are permitted into their inner circle. In many ways, this transformation is a survival response, a maturation of the INFJ's innate gifts. They stop trying to save everyone and start becoming selective about where their energy flows. The Sigma INFJ is still a visionary and a helper, but now they help through inspiration, leadership by example, or through solitary creative work rather than through emotional caretaking. Their independence is not about ego. It's about self-preservation and a clearer sense of purpose. They learn to walk alone not because they dislike people, but because they've realized that solitude is often the only place their voice is truly heard. Check out our newly released INFJ playbook. The link is in the description of this video. For an INFJ, the world has always been rich with emotional nuance and symbolic meaning. They see connections others miss, feel emotions more acutely, and often bear the emotional weight of those around them without asking for anything in return. But when life consistently fails to reflect the same emotional depth or moral integrity that the INFJ offers so freely, an inner crisis brews. The once hopeful, emotionally open INFJ begins to perceive a stark divide between their inner ideals and the external world's superficial or self-serving tendencies. This cognitive dissonance creates a sort of existential friction. The INFJ begins to question not just their relationships, but the very structure of society, its norms, its definitions of success, its metrics for value and worth. They become acutely aware of the manipulative dynamics at play in many social systems, where empathy is mistaken for weakness and sincerity is exploited. In this disillusionment lies the core trigger for the Sigma shift, a powerful realization that conformity and emotional availability can be liabilities in a world that doesn't play fair. As this awareness sharpens, so too does the INFJ's resolve. They withdraw, not out of bitterness, but out of a newfound commitment to authenticity and integrity. The need to belong begins to dissolve, replaced by a need to be free. Their loyalty, once given so easily, becomes sacred and rare. They begin curating their life with surgical precision, what they consume, who they speak to, where they spend their energy. The INFJ evolves from being a passive empath to an active architect of their solitude. This solitude is not loneliness. It is chosen. It is sacred space, a forge where the self is reforged without interference. The Sigma INFJ no longer wears their heart on their sleeve. Their emotions, still intense and vivid, are now guarded behind layers of silence and introspection. They do not speak unless there is something meaningful to say. They do not pursue connection unless it resonates deeply with their values and soul. This makes them appear distant or even cold to those who once leaned on their warmth. But in truth, this new detachment is an act of emotional self-respect. They are no longer willing to be drained by the endless tides of unreciprocated care. Despite the retreat, the Sigma INFJ does not become cynical. Their idealism still lives, burning quietly, like a candle kept behind glass. But now, it is directed inward and expressed through actions rather than emotional exchanges. They may turn to art, writing, philosophy, or activism, not to seek validation, but to channel their inner truth into the world in a way that doesn't require compromise. Their intuition sharpens during this phase. Detached from the noise of social obligation, their insight becomes startlingly precise, and their ability to see patterns in human behavior becomes almost prophetic. What separates the Sigma INFJ from mere isolation is the clarity of purpose. They are not running from the world. They are walking a different path through it, one designed by their own hand. They are not antisocial, but selectively social, gravitating toward other outliers, deep thinkers, creators, and rebels who honor the same values of depth, independence, and meaning. This version of the INFJ does not need approval, praise, or visibility. Their strength comes from their inner alignment. They understand that truth is often quiet, and that those who truly live by their values must be prepared to do so in solitude if necessary. Yet ironically, it is in this Sigma phase that the INFJ becomes most magnetic, not because they seek attention, but because they radiate something few possess: self-possession, depth, and unshakable inner peace. The world often misunderstands this INFJ. They were once the emotional anchor in chaotic rooms. Now, they're the silent strategist in the background, reading the room, but choosing not to act unless absolutely necessary. They no longer explain themselves, because they've realized that those who truly see them never needed the explanation in the first place. As the Sigma INFJ settles more deeply into this refined state of being, there's a profound and almost irreversible shift in how they experience identity, connection, and purpose. The transformation is not sudden, nor is it driven solely by pain. It is an alchemical process, catalyzed by disappointment, but ultimately steered by inner wisdom. It begins with loss, yes, the loss of illusion, the loss of naivety, the loss of the once unquestioned belief that empathy alone can fix broken things. But from that loss emerges a crystalline clarity. The INFJ begins to see that they cannot, and should not, sacrifice themselves at the altar of emotional obligation. In this change, the INFJ doesn't become less emotional. They become more sovereign with their emotions. They realize that sensitivity is not a flaw to be hidden, but a force to be protected. The Sigma INFJ becomes a gatekeeper of their own inner world. Where they once poured themselves into others freely, hoping to inspire healing or understanding, they now conserve their emotional resources with a quiet intentionality. They become more observant than expressive, more still than reactive. Every gesture, every word, every connection is measured, not from fear, but from a deep knowing that not everyone has earned access to their truth. This inner sovereignty produces a remarkable paradox. While the Sigma INFJ withdraws from the noise and shallowness of conventional social dynamics, their sense of self becomes more rooted, more expansive. They begin to draw their worth not from how others perceive them, but from their own alignment with meaning and authenticity. In solitude, they reconnect with their vision, something that might have been obscure during earlier years spent trying to be understood, trying to fit in, or trying to live up to others' emotional needs. Now, they realize their vision was never meant to be explained to everyone. It was meant to be lived quietly, powerfully, and uncompromisingly. This realization gives rise to a kind of silent confidence. The Sigma INFJ stops trying to soften their edges to accommodate others. They stop diluting their thoughts for the sake of palatability. Instead, they speak when it matters, and when they do, it carries weight. They no longer need to be seen to feel validated. The need to prove themselves dissolves, replaced by an inward assurance that they are exactly who they are meant to be, whether or not anyone notices. Relationships shift too. The Sigma INFJ is no longer drawn to the emotionally chaotic or the wounded fixer-uppers. They begin to crave resonance over drama, truth over charm, depth over intensity. They seek out souls who are self-aware, quietly intelligent, and emotionally honest. Those who value silence as much as conversation, who respect distance as much as closeness. If such people are few, the Sigma INFJ is content to walk alone. In fact, solitude becomes a kind of sanctuary, a space in which they can reconnect with their intuition, create without interruption, and reflect without distortion. Professionally, this evolution may lead the Sigma INFJ to reject traditional career paths that require constant compromise of values or superficial engagement. They may move toward independent or creative work, roles where they can exercise autonomy and uphold integrity. They may turn to writing, psychology, philosophy, or innovation, anything that allows them to build quietly, influence meaningfully, and remain largely untethered by corporate or societal expectations. Underneath all of this transformation is one unshakable truth. The Sigma INFJ has not become hard. They have become whole. They have taken the scattered pieces of themselves, the empath, the dreamer, the idealist, the misunderstood seer, and reforged them into a self-contained system of meaning. They have found peace in their complexity, strength in their solitude, and direction in their detachment. In many ways, this path is not for everyone. It requires a deep capacity for self-reflection, an ability to endure prolonged emotional solitude, and the strength to reject the easy gratification of surface-level connection. But for the INFJ who has been repeatedly burned by the world's disregard for depth, this path becomes less a choice and more a necessity. It is the only space in which they can truly breathe. This shift is monumental. For most of their life, the INFJ has existed as a paradox. Introspective yet people-oriented, idealistic yet deeply realistic about the flaws of human nature. The Sigma INFJ still embodies this paradox, but with one critical difference. They no longer wrestle with it. They accept the contradiction. They accept that they can love humanity while often needing to be far from it. They accept that they can feel profoundly, yet appear unreadable. The inner conflict that once drove them to explain, to justify, to prove, begins to quiet. They no longer need resolution. They only need truth. This new acceptance breeds a kind of stillness. The Sigma INFJ becomes more present, more observant. They no longer try to steer emotional currents. They watch them. They don't push against the noise of the world. They step aside. They no longer feel the compulsion to change people, to open their eyes or their hearts. They understand now that awakening is a personal choice, and that trying to force it often backfires. This insight frees them from the exhausting role of the emotional guide or the silent therapist they so often fall into. What begins to grow in its place is a quiet, creative power. The Sigma INFJ may turn inward, not as a retreat, but as a wellspring of vision. Art, philosophy, design, language, spiritual practice. These become the languages through which they now speak. Their voice, once hesitant or restrained by the fear of not being understood, becomes purer, clearer, and more unapologetically original. They are no longer interested in fitting their ideas into accepted forms. They begin to create new ones. In this way, the Sigma INFJ often becomes an innovator, not through loud disruption, but through subtle reinvention. At the core of their Sigma energy is autonomy, not just freedom of time or space, but a deeper form, the freedom of inner allegiance. The Sigma INFJ becomes immune to manipulation, immune to guilt tripping, immune to flattery and external pressure. They live by their own code, one defined by integrity, authenticity, and resonance. And because they are so in tune with their inner compass, They navigate life with a precision that others mistake for luck or detachment. But it's neither. It's discipline, clarity, and deep self-trust. Their social presence also changes. While traditional INFJs might have struggled with people-pleasing or overgiving, the Sigma INFJ has mastered the art of quiet boundaries. They will listen, but not absorb. They will care, but not carry. They can be present without being entangled. This dispassionate compassion often confuses people who expect warmth to be constant. The Sigma INFJ's empathy now comes with limits, and that's exactly why it has more impact. They give from overflow, not from depletion. Romantically, this version of the INFJ becomes a challenge to connect with, not because they are unavailable, but because they no longer tolerate pretense. They are not impressed by charm, credentials, or promises. They are drawn to authenticity, self-awareness, and depth of character. They require relationships that are soul-deep, transparent, and liberating, not just emotionally intense or romantically flattering. This makes their connections fewer, but far more profound. And once bonded with someone of equal depth, the Sigma INFJ becomes an unparalleled partner, fiercely loyal, intellectually stimulating, spiritually aligned, and emotionally present. There's also an unshakable calm that begins to radiate from them. Having seen the worst of people and the best of them, and having made peace with both, the Sigma INFJ no longer panics in chaos or craves control. They trust their timing. They trust their silence. They trust that sometimes the most powerful thing one can do is simply hold space for healing, for change, or for nothing at all. The Sigma INFJ does not arrive at this place quickly. It is the result of scars that have healed without bitterness, solitude that has been embraced without fear, and a love of truth that outweighs the desire for comfort. It is the INFJ at full power. Check out our newly released INFJ playbook. The link is in the description of this video.